Hey folks, this is Rob Ager of Ager Games, and this is a very off-the-cuff video. I've never done a video tutorial before on anything to do with game design or programming or anything like that, but this just occurred to me before and I thought, yeah, let's go for it. Let's just do this ad-libbed. Okay, so the subject here is procedural generation in game environments. Now, normally the way it's done from the tutorials that I've been looking at is, let's say we've got these three blocks here. Procedural generation is sort of done in a tiled format. So let's say this particular tile here, you would have like a house on that or something. You know, like when you get a Minecraft village, you would have a particular tile that would have a house and maybe some fences around it or something like that. And that's like a prefab. And that house will generate in the world, and then next to it over here, another part of the village will generate like maybe the same house or a path or a different type of house or some sort of little farmyard prefab. And so a Minecraft village typically has, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12, maybe 20 at most, I would say, different prefab elements that make up a village. And when you go into a village in Minecraft, it's very obvious where the tiled elements are taking place. You know, you go into a village and the overall layout might be a bit different to usual, but you recognize all the usual buildings. And so it gets a little bit boring when it's done that way in the tiled format. You can tell where the edges of the tiled, invisible tiles are within the world because you're familiar with the prefabs. And so let's say you had these objects here. These could be tiled and you could say, okay, this one here, the middle one, you could say this one here, when it spawns in the world, it might generate one there, and it might generate one there, or it might alternately generate one there, and then it can branch outwards until you get a series of them going outwards in a certain radius, you know, in a slightly different format each time. Now, what I wanted to do in world generation stuff, and I had a good experience of doing this in a Minecraft mod, which I'll just bring up now. This is a mod that I made last year. I got into making Minecraft mods. I've stopped doing Minecraft mods now because I'm working on my own game. But this one was pretty damn good. This is called Ager's Massive Castles. And one of the best things about this is that I was always finding the procedural generation of world elements, even within Minecraft mods, to generally be quite disappointing. I wanted to have a mod that would generate like huge castles that would be quite different each time, would have a lot more variation within them than the usual Minecraft generated villages and buildings would have. So I made this castle generator, and I haven't recorded any video footage of the mod, but it works really well, and the castles that generate are virtually always different. So if you look at this, you can kind of see the tiled elements that are going on and the prefab structures that make up this entire castle structure. So you can see you've got like a bridge structure here with steps going down, and you've got the same ones are popping up over there, and you can see you've got a corner structure, an inverted corner structure there, and you've got a straight wall bit there and a curved wall bit there. And so there's obviously like, say, 20 or 30 basic prefab variants that make up the outer walls of the castle and that make up the bridges that go outside. So looking down here, you can see you've got towers. Now, I started doing this nesting approach to world generation where each wall would have a chance to generate a building that would be going upwards. And as you can see, 5 buildings have generated going upwards here. Here's another variant. So I had the outer walls of the castle will generate first, and then it decides whether to generate the buildings going upwards or not. So those round ones there, those round structures, they have a chance to create like a tall tower on top of them. Those 3 ones didn't generate one, but this one did. Now, I also started having a lot of variation within these castle structures as well. So where you see the logs on the floor there, and you know, various other little items, and there's a well in the middle there. Now, each tile that makes up the castle yeah, it would have a basic prefab, but within that tile there would be more prefabs, and some of the prefabs would just be like 2 or 3 blocks. So this particular inverted corner tile there, I think it would start about there and spread across to there and then go upwards. That has a chance to generate the log structure that is there. And you can see within the castle there's chances to generate houses. You can see some of the log structures coming along, and the pathways, I also had those generating randomly within each tile. I will mention that there's some other things, such as you can see some of the sort of cracked tiles in the walls and stuff there. I had some randomly appearing blocks within the walls, which would have a little sort of a hidden section within them where the player could like find a crack in the wall, click on it and find gold or something hidden in the wall, and those would appear randomly. So if this particular square structure there appeared, you couldn't always rely on where the gold would be hidden in the walls within that structure, because the cracks in the walls containing the gold would be randomized every time that structure appeared. So it would always be different. And I had things like that going on throughout the entire structure. So I really, really liked the way these castles came out. And for me, this was much better form of world generation, having prefabs within prefabs, and sometimes prefabs within prefabs within prefabs, so that the world generates differently each time. And each block structure within this generates randomized elements within. Okay, so that was the Minecraft experience I had, which led to me doing some randomization within my current game, which is a top-down shooter called To the Death. And I'll show you some footage of that later. But first of all, let's look at the basics of what I've been doing here. I call this Inverse Procedural Generation. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Instead of having the world generate where there's nothing in this area, and then a block will generate in the middle and will then have randomization determining whether blocks appear outside of it. Instead of doing that, what I do is I create a large complex structure manually by hand here, and I then have parts of it disappear. And there are various advantages to the world generation in doing it this way. But first of all, I'll show you the basics in terms of the coding element. So at the moment, I've just got the 3 blocks there. If I press play, okay, as you can see, the 3 blocks are just there in the world. There's nothing generative going on. So let's add a bit of code to these blocks. So first of all, let's increase the amount of the blocks. All right, so we've got 5 blocks there. Now the code I'm going to use is this. It's a very basic piece of code, very easy. Okay, so what this piece of code does overall is it determines, if it's applied to one of these blocks, it determines whether that block stays in the world or disappears. So if I place it on all 5 of these blocks, there will be a chance for some of them to stay and some of them to disappear, or all of them might stay or all of them might disappear. Right, so we've started off with 2 integer variables at the top there, one called random range, and I've given it a value of 10, and one called random chosen, and I didn't need to give that a value for reasons which will become obvious. And then we've got a float variable called invoke delay, and I've given that a value of 2. All right, so when one of these blocks loads up, when the level, the arena, this environment loads up and the block first appears, it will automatically run this little bit of code here. It's an on start. As soon as the block appears in the world, it runs this bit of code. So the first thing it does is it takes the invoke delay variable from up here and gives it a value. Now, I didn't need to give it a value of 2 there because it gets randomized here anyway, so forget that. That didn't need to be there. It's irrelevant. So it gives a randomized value for the invoke delay, and it chooses anywhere between 0.3f and 3f. Now, 1f equals a second in the game world. When you're playing the game, a single second has a float variable of 1f, as far as I know. So I've told this to pick a invoke delay time that is anywhere between 0.3 of a second and 3 seconds. And I'll explain in a minute why I've done that. So it chooses the delay time, the invoke delay, and then it runs an invoke, which means it calls on this procedure here. So invoke randomize, and it does it in a certain amount of time. So if the invoke delay time, which got randomized, let's say that came out at 2.2f, then it runs this line, which says invoke the randomize procedure, which is here. You see it's randomize. It will run this, and it will run it in 2 seconds or 2.2 seconds, whatever the value was that was created by this randomization procedure. It will run this piece of code after that amount of time. So the object starts up, it picks a random time, it waits for that time, and then it runs this randomized code here. Now this is the bit that decides whether the object will or won't disappear from the world. So the variable random chosen gets calculated first. So we've given it a range of between 0 and random range. Now random range is already set up here as 10. So random range equals 10. So it will choose a value between 0 and 10. And that will become the variable random chosen. It will equal whatever that number is. So let's say it came out with a variable of 6. It chose between 0 and 10 and it went for 6. Then it asks if random chosen, which we know equals 6, if random chosen is greater than 4, then destroy the game object. So because this came out with a random chosen value of 6, the object gets destroyed and removed. But if the random chosen value had been 4 or less, then the object wouldn't get destroyed. And so we take this whole piece of code here and we apply it to each object. Okay, so there it is down there. It's called object randomizer. Now let's apply it to, we'll put it on there, these ones called platform, lit, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Those are the objects that are going to be randomized. So I've just applied it to the first one, and you can see that over here. You can see the variables, random range and invoke delay. We'll come back to the invoke delay in a minute, but first of all, I'll just show this in action. So I'll put it on this one, and the second one, and the third one. So we've got it the same in each there. And the fourth and fifth ones don't have it. With that in place, just keeping it simple for now, if we press play, you see there that out of the 3 that had the randomization code attached to it, 2 of them disappeared and 1 of them stayed. All right. Now the 2 over here on the right, they didn't have the code attached, so they just stayed anyway. Yeah, so we had randomization there. Let's just run that one more time. Okay, so initially they're all there, and now the 2 that disappeared before, this time those 2 have ended up staying and the other one has disappeared. Okay, and just running it one more time again, I just want you to take note of something important. Each of the blocks will take a short amount of time to decide whether it disappears or not. There you go. 2 of them stayed, 1 of them disappeared, and it probably disappeared within about half a second, if that. Now, if we run it again, we might get variations on how long it takes for each block to disappear or not. Okay, it took a little bit longer for them to disappear this time, but 2 of them disappeared, and they disappeared almost the same time. So what's going on with this delay? Now, the reason I've done that, and you don't have to do this, it's not essential, but I did it anyway because, well, basically the problem, let's say you had 200 of these blocks in a particular structure, and you had this code applied to all 200 of them where it has to randomize and decide whether the block is going to stay or not. If all of those blocks appear in the world at the exact same time, and they are all calculating whether they should stay or not at the exact same time, then you're going to get some slowdown in your world generation. And if the player's in the middle of a fight and a structure is being generated, and the game is having to decide whether those certain blocks appear or don't appear, if the game is running all of those chunks of code all at the exact same time, it will almost certainly cause a lag in the game for a second or two. And that was a problem I was having with it. And so the simple way of getting around that was to have the invoke delay at the start and have it randomized. So each of the objects that has this code will have a delay fuse put on it that sort of makes the block wait before it decides whether to make the block disappear or not. And so because it's randomized, the amount of time that each block waits before it runs the decision to make itself stay or disappear, each block will have a slightly different time at which it runs that code. And that's why we have the invoke delay getting randomized at the start. And so if you have 100 blocks here and they've all got a randomized code, then within any split second, you're only going to get 1, 2, or maybe 3 of them that are running their procedures all at once. And so because the disappearance of the blocks or deciding whether they stay or not, because that was all being spread out over about 3 seconds, I found that prevents the game from lagging when the structure is sort of inverse generating. Now don't worry if you don't understand exactly how all that works. It's not that difficult, it's not too complex, and as you can see the code is very short. I mean, you could just type up this code within a couple of minutes yourself, no problem, and then attach it to each object, and it should work fine the way it is. There's things you could do to vary it, like let's say you had a huge structure with like 1,000 different pieces in it, and 1,000 pieces there has to be a decision calculated by the computer to decide whether that block stays or goes. And you're finding that there's a lot of lag even with using this code. Then one way of changing that is you could change the invoke delay value. So at the moment it's between 0.3 seconds and 3 seconds. And let's say you could change that to 9 seconds. Yeah. And that would mean that the game would take 9 seconds to decide which blocks stay or don't stay. And of course, you don't want that happening on screen. You want your structure to be running through all this code. You want it to be running off screen. So, if your player is fighting in a particular room, then while they are fighting in that room, the next room should be generating these structures off screen so that the player doesn't see which blocks are appearing and disappearing. But for now, I've found that the 3 frames is fine there. You could vary that as much as you like. Now, one other thing you can do with this, now let's say you want to increase or decrease the chances that each of these blocks will or won't disappear. At the moment, we have a random range of 10, and if the chosen number between 0 and 10 is greater than 4, then the block disappears. And of course, the random number, because it's between 0 and 10, the number 10 actually won't get chosen. If you have a random range of 0 to 10, it doesn't end up with a number that is either 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10. What you will end up with is it will choose a random number that is either 0 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but the actual value of 10 won't appear. So you've still got 10 numbers that can be chosen, but one of them is 0. So at the moment, because the object will be removed if the randomly chose number is above 4, then that means it's got a 50% chance of disappearing. So if the random chosen number is calculated as 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, which is 5 of the numbers, half of them, then the object will disappear. If it's lower than that, if it's 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, then the object will stay. So it's a 50-50 chance. Now, if you want to change the chances of a particular object staying or disappearing, you can do it over here in the inspector. So let's say with the first object there, we could change the random value to 20. And so that means that based upon this part here, if the random chosen variable ends up with a value greater than 5, but running all the way up to 20, then the object will disappear. So changing it to 20, as far as I know, that creates a 75% chance that the object will disappear. So we've applied that to this one here. Okay, so we'll apply that to this one. again, and this one again. And we will apply the same to the other two blocks there. So all 5 blocks will now have a chance to disappear. All right, so if there's a 75% chance for each of these blocks to disappear, then hardly any of them should stay. So let's see what happens. There you go, only one of them stayed. And did you see how the other objects all disappeared at slightly different times? That's an example of how the game will not be slowed down by having to make these objects run the code as to whether they stay or not, because there's a split second or two difference between each object running that code. You're not getting the game slow down. Okay, so let's run it one more time. There's a good chance that none of them will appear, that they will all disappear. One of them again, but it was a different one. Okay, so you get the point. Now, if I grab all of those 5 there, I think I can change the random range value back to 10 on all 5 at once. Did that work? Yes, it did. Okay, so they're all changed back to 10. Right, so that's the basics of all of how it works. Now let's see how we can use this overall. Now, I'm just going to take a few minutes to set up a sort of small mini maze here so that we can see this in action. So I've set up a perimeter of what would likely be, I don't know, some sort of maze or something. And I want most of these blocks on the outside to stay, but I would like an occasional one here and there to disappear so that there would be a randomized way out of this arena or way in that would be different each time it loads. So I've applied the same code that we were just looking at before. I've applied it to about 6 random blocks around the edges, and let's just see what happens if we run that. Okay, 1 or 2 of them should disappear. Okay, so we've got three doorways out have disappeared. And if we run it again, we might get the same ones, or we might get 1 or 2 of them the same, and then others slightly different. Okay, one of them was the same and another one was different. Okay, so that's a way that you can generate the doorways in the outside. Now, an advantage to doing this is that if you were generating this particular outer wall structure, if you were doing it by the additive method of procedural generation, then the game would have to start off by creating one of these blocks and then generating the rest of them around it. But with this method, I've already set up the walls, and all we're doing is subtracting a block here or there. So there's a little advantage you get there, is you're not having to generate all those blocks, you're just having 1 or 2 disappear. Okay, now there is a chance that somewhere along the way, you might get this structure would generate and no doors appear at all. So in that case, you would have to manually guarantee that a particular door is going to appear. There's other ways of coding it so that you could do that, but a simple way would be to just say, let's just remove, say, that block there completely, so that would always be a way out. Let's do that one. So we always get those 2 be missing. Let's say this one is always not there. So we'll always have 3 doors out, but you could run it again and you'd find an extra randomized door in or out elsewhere. Okay, yeah, so we've got 5 ways in and out there. Okay, now let's look at changing it within this structure. All right, so I've just added some internal maze elements, and all of the interior blocks here have randomization on them, so they have a chance to disappear or not. I could take the code off any one of them and say, like, this block here will always be there or not. Or I could just completely fill up the entire room with the randomized blocks. But the problem with that is it wouldn't guarantee that there's always going to be a pathway through the room. Whichever door you come in here, you can get to the other doors. With the way it's set up at the moment. So let's run this and see what the interior of the maze comes out like. Okay, so not bad, eh? That's looks quite different than I expected. Let's run it again. Exact same thing, same setup, same bits of code attached. Let's see what we end up with this time. Quite different again. Let's try one more time. And again, completely different layout. So we could probably run that, say, about 40 or 50 times, and the chances of getting the exact same layout twice would be quite minimal. Now you can do a lot more with this. So let's stop that. Actually, one thing I am going to do is, at the moment, we're sticking with the kind of gridded structure, and it all looks very gridded, and it's obviously gridded. We could use different objects in here. We could have round objects. We could have, other polygon shapes. You could change the sizes of these objects, no problem. Let's see. So let's take this one. Let's take this one, and we'll just move it over, and let's rotate it. And let's do the same with this one here. And let's take one block and make it a lot bigger. Let's make the Y value a bit higher. Let's do that as 8. And let's take another block over here and make it smaller. So yeah, you can muck around with each item in there. You can shift it around. It doesn't have to be in a gridded format. You can alter the positions of these however you like, and it won't make any difference to the generation. Okay, so we've ended up with a one that's rotated a bit there, and we've ended up with that thinner one is still there. So just adding some little alterations of size, position, rotation, it gets us out of that gridded look. And a great advantage of doing it all this way is by building your structure like this to begin with, by manually building it but making it quite complex, you're making sure that there aren't going to be problems with the final generated thing. So if we were starting with a single block in the middle and it was having to generate outwards to create this whole maze, it would be harder to make it generate so that there would always be a path through the maze. But I've made the maze quite complex. I've overcrowded the maze, but I've done so in a way that guarantees that the player can always get through this door, to that door, and to that door. They can always find a path through because the game will not be adding any blocks that will block any of those paths. It will only be removing some blocks and probably creating an extra path or two in the process. So that's one advantage. Now another trick I'm going to show you that you can do with this, this is something I really quite like. Let's take, just for prominence, let's take this big block in the middle. That has got randomization on it, and let's say we wanted to have another block appear on top of it, directly on top, like it was a tower. Get that down to 4 and move it down so it attaches on top. Let's say we wanted a random chance for this block up here to appear or not appear. Now at the moment there could be a problem where the block underneath ends up disappearing but this one ends up staying, and then you've got a block floating in the middle of the air. So how do you deal with that? Very, very simple. We've got this block here which is highlighted over here in the hierarchy, so that's number 56. And we'll grab the next one, which is right below it, which is 69. We will attach that one as a child object of that. So what happens with that is the bottom block here makes a decision whether it's going to appear or disappear, right? If it disappears, it takes the block above it with it. So this block on the top cannot stay in the world unless the block below is staying. So it's a very simple way of making sure that a tower of structures like this will stay or not. And we could actually do that again. Let's duplicate that again and we'll nest it again. So we're giving it 3 levels. Right, let's move that 3rd level up. Yeah. So this particular tower has a chance to either not be there at all, in which case all the blocks above it will disappear, or it has a chance to be either 1, 2, or 3 blocks floors tall. Okay, so let's run that and see what happens. Okay, as we can see, the entire thing disappeared there. Now let's say we want to increase the chances of that tower staying, but have the chances of the blocks above disappear and stay the same. So let's see if we go on that one. Remember the variables over here, the random range? Let's say we lower the random range down to, let's say, 7. That would increase the chances of the entire tower staying. It would significantly increase it. So let's try it again like that. Okay, so this time the tower has stayed, but the 2 blocks above it have disappeared. So let's try it once more, see if we can have that tower appear taller. So this time the entire thing stayed. There you go. Now another little trick I like to do with this, which I've been doing with the game that I've been making, is to have structures embedded within each other. So let's see, for the sake of this, I will remove quite a few of these objects out the way so that we can have room to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's take this and move it over there because it's all one structure. And let's remove the nested items within there. Now let's say we had this object here. We can place that one inside the other one. Now it's not nested within the other one. In terms of the actual world, it's still a separate object, but I've just placed one overlapping the other. I haven't made the smaller one a child of the big one, or a big one a child of the other one. There's a chance that the large one will disappear. If it disappears, then the one that is on the inside has a chance of staying, but we can guarantee that stays by removing the code. So we've removed the randomization code off that, guaranteeing that this block will stay. So this one is around it. So there's a chance that in this position in the world, we will end up with either the big block, or if it disappears, there will definitely be a small block there. In fact, let's make this a bit more fun. Let's take that, put it there, and then we'll duplicate this one, and we will make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so it's like Russian dolls. Now they don't always all have to be the same object, they could be all different ones. Alright, so we've got randomization on this object and randomization on this one, but not on the one that's on the very inside. So let's see how the world generates with this. Okay, so we've ended up with the middle-sized one appearing, and the other block, the smaller one, might be there inside, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay, so let's just try that again. This time the large one has stayed. Now there is a chance that all 3 of them will disappear completely and there won't be any. And there we can see the smaller one has appeared that time. So yeah, that's another way of using this. And we can make it a bit more complex and unusual than that as well. Let's say we can have objects that overlap each other. Like say we could do this. We make sure when we're putting it together that things are overlapping properly. Now, as you can see there's some flickering going on because there's some elements that are overlapping each other too much. So let's say we shift that one up, and let's take the smaller one and shift it outwards a little bit. Let's say we shift the smaller one to there. And we will add the randomization code onto this smaller one. But we will remove it from the large one this time. See, just to make things look a bit less blocky, let's rotate the top one, rotate that one as well. Oh, again, we got flicker going on there. Let's make this one really tall, actually, 12. No, we won't go that big. We'll go 10. Z. Okay, so with this one, the large middle block is guaranteed to stay because we've taken the randomization code off it, but all these other blocks attached to it are randomized. So we can end up with a different building structure. Okay. So yeah, I mean, you can see how you can play around with this. And like, as I say, they don't always have to be blocky objects. We can put other things in. You can put any objects you like in here. They don't have to be positioned within a tiled format, because that's the whole point of the tiled world generation method, is that the tiles prevent the objects from overlapping each other, prevent the prefabs from overlapping each other and causing problems. But here, with this method, you don't have to stick to a tiled generation. You're doing what I call inverse procedural generation, or you could call it subtractive procedural generation. So you're creating a very complex structure yourself manually, and because you're doing it manually, you can make it more aesthetically good, and then you're just having the procedural generation take away elements of it. Now, there is another method that I've come up with, because sometimes I was finding with these kinds of structure generation methods, sometimes I would find that a part of the arena would just end up with nothing in it because all of the objects in that area had all disappeared just, you know, by chance. So here we've got this area and this area here are a bit empty. So one way that I've been dealing with that is by, I would go through each part of the arena and I would take like, say, one particular block like that one and remove the object randomization code so that that block will always be there. And I could come over and do the same with that one. Well, we've already got this one here, which is guaranteed to stay because that's got no randomization code on it. So with that, we should end up always with at least one block in every corner. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I mean, we could have done the same, place a block up here that was guaranteed to stay, so that there will always be a block in a certain area and there won't be too much empty space. So that's one way of doing things different. All right, so there's one other little quick method that I want to run through here. I won't go too much into the coding aspect of it because I don't like spending too much time explaining code. I just want to explain like the principles of what we're doing here. Let's move this down here. Now let's say I'm absolutely sure that I want an object to appear in this particular position, but I want that object to be randomized. I only want one object to appear, but I want it to be a randomized object. So with this code that I've made here, it probably looks a bit long-winded, but it's not as complex as it looks. It probably could be shortened, this code, actually. There's a way of shortening it, but that doesn't matter. I'm just showing you the basic principle. It's not that hard a piece of code to do, but I will just let you sort of breeze over it there. If you want, you could type up this code. A lot of it's just repeating the same thing roughly, but anyway, let's go back from here. I want an object to appear here, but I want it randomized as to what the object is. So I'm not going to have any randomization code on the object. So let's remove that. Remove component. Let's move this over here. So I want either this object or this object to appear, but not both of them. I only want one of them to appear. Let's get rid of that one. Let's take this one and move it over here as well. That to there. And let's make a duplicate of that. Shift it upwards and across. And let's rotate that one. Let's take this. Let's take this one and duplicate that as well. Put it there. And let's change its rotation so it's more straight. So that's 5 objects all roughly in the same place. And let's take this one over here and drag it in as well. And let's place it there. So it doesn't matter that there's some clipping overlap going on with the textures here, because all 6 of these objects that are in this place are not all going to generate. Only 1 out of the 6 is going to generate. So how do we do this? Right, so let's grab all of these objects first. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Let me just move them all roughly into the same place here. Yeah, okay, so as you can see, we've got all 6 of them selected, all in the same place. What I'm going to do is right click on them. I'm going to say create empty parent, right? I'm just going to call this, let's call it object to choose, right, just so we know, looking at it, what it is. So it's an empty object. So we've got an empty object there containing these 6 objects. So if we deactivate it, all 6 disappear. Okay, so now we take this code here, the map randomizer, and we attach this code to, where is it? Map randomizer. Attach it to object to choose. Okay, now as you can see over there on the right, this object, which contains all 6 of these objects, has got variable positions there. So let's drag each of these in turn, one at a time. So what this is going to do is this map randomizer code is going to pick one of these objects to keep, and it's going to delete the other 5. Oh, actually, yeah. Sorry, I forgot. In order for this to work, we have to take each of these and turn it off. We're going to toggle those items off. Okay, so they're all invisible there. Now the object that contains them is not toggled off. It's there, but it's just invisible. And when the code runs, it is going to pick one of these 6 objects, and it is going to turn it, it's going to toggle it to on. It's going to make it appear in the world, and the other 5 it will delete completely from the world, so that those items aren't taking up any memory. So assuming I've remembered correctly how this works, let's see how that goes. Okay, so just the smaller one appeared there, and the other 5 got deleted. Let's try again. This time the big one appeared, or one of the big ones. Yeah, this time that one appeared, one of the longer ones. But we're not ending up with more than one. We always get one of those 6, and we never get more than one, and we never get none. So that's a way of guaranteeing that there will always be a particular structure in a certain area, but randomizing what that structure is. Now, one thing you can do here is you could take, let's say you filled in this maze again. You could take this entire maze. Let's just grab the whole thing, and we could create an empty parent for the entire maze, so that if we switch the parent on or off, the maze disappears. So we've got the entire maze contained within one object there. Now you could make manually, say, 6 different versions of this entire maze and contain each of them within an object. Let's call it maze 1. Right. Now you could then take maze 1 and you could duplicate it. maze 2. We'll switch off maze 1 there. Toggle, yeah. Now you can muck around with maze 2, do whatever you want with it. You could even change its position. Let's just change a couple of things quickly. Let's just do that. And just for the sake of time, let's duplicate this again. And we will, let's see, we will rotate it 90 degrees. Okay, let's turn off maze 2 there. So we've got the same maze. Oh. Put that there. That's the third variant. So we've got 3 variants of the maze there. 4. And this one, let's say we're going to rotate it at an odd angle. I'm sure if this will fit properly on, but what the hell, it's only a demo. Okay, so for this one, for variance number 5, let's change its position to over here. And let's say we lower it so that it's just like small bits sticking out the floor that you could jump on top of if you were a character walking around in this maze. And let's duplicate again. And let's increase the Y height of this one. So we've got a much taller maze now. Yeah. Taller walls. Yeah. You can do whatever you want. Vary these 6 however you like. Now, what we can then do is, let's see, oh, we got to toggle that one off as well. So we've got the 6 maze variants there. You can put loads of variety into each one of them. And again, we will create an empty parent. Let's call the parent maze selector. Now let's add that map randomization code onto the parent object. Then we'll drag each maze into there. All right. Okay, so we've got 6 variants of the maze, and each one of those mazes has got lots of variants within it. So if we run it now, we will get one of those mazes appear, but not more than one. Okay, so that was the first generation from that. Okay, so we got the low-level maze where you could jump on top of the walls. All right, so we've got the offset rotation maze variant appearing there. So just with these 6 randomized maze setups, you know, 6 overall maze structures and then lots of randomization within each one, you could run this several hundred times and you are very unlikely to get the exact same maze layout twice. And like I say, that the thing I love about it is that it ensures that you don't get your randomization running away and doing crazy things, because you've already set the limits yourself by building the complex maze in the first place and then using a subtractive world generation element. So one of the things you could do with this, let's say you had an office building. Each room within the office building could contain a bunch of objects in it that have a randomized chance of disappearing. You could have desks and chairs. You could have, first of all, the rooms within each floor of the building could be randomized in what layout they have. And then within each of those layouts, there could be randomization of desks, partitions, whatever, windows, things like that. You could make a huge house with this and have all the kitchen items, the sort of worktops and the furniture in the house and the beds and everything all randomized to appear in different ways. if you had 6 variants of the basic house, and within each floor you had 6 variants, and then within each of those rooms you had a number of objects that had a chance of appearing or disappearing, you could end up with a house structure that is all contained within a way that you've set it up manually, but it can generate in hundreds or even thousands of different ways. So yeah, this is, I call this either subtractive procedural generation or inverse procedural generation. Okay, so I hope this all helped. I've looked at other ways of doing procedural world generation. I just didn't like the very tiled look, a predictable tiled look that a lot of world generation has. And for me, I'm finding that this breaks that pattern. And I'm going to finish this video by showing you some footage from my game, which is in development at the moment, which is called To the Death, which is a top-down shooter. And it uses these procedural generation methods in order to have arenas that hardly ever repeat themselves in the exact same way. So every time players are fighting in those arenas, whether it's against each other or against robots, the layout of the arena will always be at least a little bit different to the last time. If you want to see more videos on game development, I'm not by any means a super expert, but I do have a lot of ideas, and I have managed to do some unusual things with the game that I've been doing. And I did work in video games a long time ago, back in the 90s. If you want to see more videos of this type, these game development videos, then you can support me on Patreon. The link is in the video description. And make sure to sign up to the channel, because otherwise you're going to miss out on future uploads. Okay, thanks for watching, folks, and bye-bye. I'll leave you with this footage from my game in progress. Take it easy.
Commence combat. Commence combat. Commence combat. Commence combat. Commence combat.